Welcome to Step Into the Pivot. We're your hosts. I'm Theresa Conti.
And I'm Ivana. We talk with people just like you. We have honest conversations about current issues that women and men face and how we pivot to address them in our lives.
This podcast is your companion as you step into a workout or take some time for yourself. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Step Into the Pivot. I'm Theresa Conti.
And I'm Ivana, and we are here today with our guest, Kelly Majdan, who is an author, speaker, and wellness advisor. And we invited her to join us for the conversation because she has some really interesting pivots to talk about. Also, because we've noticed how in the world of work, she shows up and encourages others to tap into their own power to live a life of well-being, longevity, financial stability. So topics that Theresa and I both care deeply about. And we really like her approach of guidance. She guides folks like us, like you, listening in developing a wellness strategy. So we wanted to bring her on and ask her a little more about the wellness strategy. The idea is to really maximize time, money, resources, and achieve the healthy lifestyle that you desire, as Kelly says, without breaking the bank. And Kelly is a living embodiment of those principles. So you can learn more about her and read more about her background and read her bio and also check out her amazing endeavors associated with our show notes on our podcast website. But right now we have her right here. So let's just get into the conversation. Theresa, do you want to kick us off with the first question?
I do. So first of all, Kelly, thank you so much for being here. It's really a joy to have you. So let's talk. Let's just jump right in. So what made you take that leap after 25 years in financial services to the wellness industry?
Oh, wow. Yes. Well, first, it's great. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you guys so much for inviting me on. This is going to be fun. So, as with anything, it's a journey. And I love the topic of the pivot because I never really thought of it too much that way. Because sometimes when you're in the middle of it, you really don't realize that you are in a pivot. But it truly probably did start with that from that perspective. So, my husband had brain surgery, or we discovered he had needed to have brain surgery back in 2014. So it'll actually be, we just hit, 10 years since he's had his brain surgery. And at that point in time, we were, I was a financial advisor working through trying to just make ends meet. And we were both climbing the corporate ladder. We had two small kids. And, we were just kind of trudging through our early 40s, just trying to make things happen like most of us do, right? In the start of our midlife when corporate life is just kind of taken over with family life, right? And it was that time we had to pull back to get him healthy because the brain surgery basically it slammed on our brakes because we were just kind of going along with life. Everything was great. I had done my first full marathon, first and last. I'm going to check the box. We're good. And we were kind of just working through our just everyday stuff. And from the time that he went into the hospital and then came back, we had a lot of kind of tribulations or little challenges while he was recovering. But during that point in time, I had a few friends that asked me to join them on this thing called a Warrior Dash. And I'm like, sure, sign me up. Sounds like fun. But they didn't tell me how muddy it was. So I'm like, wait a minute. What's a Warrior Dash? Can we stop for a second and go back and figure this one out? Anyway, this just started a big journey for us on the obstacle courses and the travel and really pulling our health together and really kind of trying to figure out as I was working through that menopause and perimenopause and all that kind of fun stuff that comes along with your 40s. And while while he was recovering, my back also went out on me so much so that I couldn't I had to sit down on the floor in order to be able to tie my shoes. Because if I leaned over, I literally could not lift myself back up without holding on to something to push myself back up. So what I discovered was I had degenerating discs in my lower back. So all of this really came about when you're a caregiver, you stop taking care of yourself and you care for everybody else. So whereas my big health thing was the discs, but it was really more the lack of taking care of myself while I was trying to take care of my husband through his brain surgery, and he was laid up for 3 months, getting him healthy again, making sure the kids were taken care of, making sure the dogs were taken care of because we had just got 2 large puppies that turned into ginormous dogs. And, all of that stuff that we're trying to make sure you've got FMLA taken care of, you've got, all of the things that are on your plate, you put yourself on the back burner. And that's kind of why that getting out there to do that obstacle course was such a big thing for me, because it was, okay, this is something I want to do. I've wanted to do one for a long time. And I knew that would force me, because I'm a goal person. Like I know I always enjoy working out, but I will make myself work out if I have a goal in mind and I'm doing something. Like, so I had to get healthy. I had to get myself a little bit better in shape so I could go at least somewhat participate in this race with some good type of skills whatsoever, right? So that was really, like, that was our biggest moment from the pivot movement. But what transpired from there was just, since I work with, in my corporate career, or as a registered investment advisor, working with corporate 401k plans, I did a lot of meeting with a lot of individuals, one-on-ones with employees. And there were 2 things that just, keep popping up and when I was meeting with employees, is that's going to really negatively impact their later years. And that's their health and their wealth. And my passion for health on the side of trying to get us healthy, and everything that I was discovering on that side, made me sit there and think, okay, wait a minute, there's got to be a way to merge these 2 together. And so I kind of put my head down and started researching, and discovered that, oh, there is this thing called a board certified health and wellness coach. And I went in to figure out, how do I go back to school because, I live in this credential world. And plus I really wanted to make sure I understood properly how to really merge these together. And I know going back to school would help me do that. So I went back to school, and after 2 years, now became a board certified health and wellness coach, thinking, how do I pull these 2 together? And what I discovered through all of this was the fact, actually trying to work with people to help them with their health will help them with their wealth, because it's all mindset, it's strategy, it's making choices. It's really working on yourself from within to discover, what really does this mean to me, and what do I want my world to look like. So it was taking that pivot in that respect and helping people, okay, wait a minute, maybe what we really need to do is, in order to help them with their wealth and their health, is really help them work on themselves and make that strategy for their plan for their health and their future.
So a few of the things you said really stuck out to me. One is that, like, sometimes when we are a caregiver, we don't take enough care of ourselves. Like, I hear those stories all the time about that. So I think that's an amazing point for our audience. And then I think you're right. Like, the other stories we hear sometimes is, okay, I just retired and now I'm sick and I can't go enjoy the things that I really want to enjoy in my life, right? That I worked all these years to do, and now have the time and hopefully the money to do some of those, and it just becomes that sort of thing.
Right. And it's so sad, because you know, we are taking care of, or helping take care of, my husband's father, because his mother unfortunately left us last year. And it just watching that deterioration, and the thought that they aren't able to do the things that they really thought they were going to be able to do.
Mhm.
And it's sad, but it's also empowering, because what we know is we have control over that. And that's the biggest thing that we have to, and I really want to impart to people, you do have control over that. If you really take a look at the stats and you really understand your health metrics, 53% of the impact to your health is life choices. And then really only about, I think it's 12% is genetics. The rest of it is kind of environment and a few other things going on there. So this is a good and bad news for people. It's either good news that you've got control, or it's a, oh crap moment. Oh gosh, I got control. Like, you really kind of have to think through that a little bit in that respect. But the other side of it is that, what made us see, my husband had double vision, and that's what really prompted us to kind of figure out, okay, what was really going on. And it just, that helped us discover he had a pineal gland cystic mass sitting in the middle of his brain. Okay, well, it really wasn't the cyst that was in the middle of his brain that was causing him trouble. It turns out he has a neuromuscular autoimmune issue called Lambert-Eaton myasthenic syndrome. And this is a incurable, there's no cure for it right now. So it's something we're going to be dealing with for the rest of our life, but we found a way to deal with it. And that's the other part of it, is that so many people, and I say this and I'm going to get on my soapbox, I try not to, but we give up. We think, oh, it's just age. Oh, it's just life. It's just this point of time. I'm supposed to be like this. No, just if I could just tell your audience, no, you are not supposed to be like this. There's so many things that you have control over that you can improve. You just have to listen to yourself, and you've got to understand and kind of be curious and continue to peel that apple or onion back or whatever you want to call it, so that you can really find out what's going on. Because we would not have found out that my husband was dealing with limbs if I didn't sit there and say, okay, you're not improving now that you've had the brain surgery. Now that we've done this, your prism glasses are getting thicker and thicker and thicker. I'm like, this is not right. We need to keep looking, and we need to keep fighting for yourself, and you have to keep fighting for your health.
Yeah, the word agency it comes to mind, when you're talking about this sense of, inner fire about like, wait, things may be happening here. And like we talk on the podcast, I may be thrown off course right now. And perhaps I didn't have any control over that. I didn't have any control over that piece of news I didn't want to receive. You didn't have any control over, maybe some of the circumstances that you were in, but that doesn't mean that you don't have agency, and that then there are quite a few actions you can take to really get back on track. And you mentioned your background, retirement advisor, and now you sound so passionate about educating folks about that space, about control and agency. So we learned something from you, Theresa and I, that we want to share with our listeners, and that is the idea of advisor, yes, but now fiduciary wellness advisor. What is that, Kelly?
I have
Tell
to
us
giggle
more.
because I totally made that up. But okay, so and for those that are in the financial services industry, this will really connect very well with you. And for others outside, we'll connect the dots. If you go back and you look at our history of our world, our financial services world, we had something called suitability versus a best fit. And that's the suitability is kind of your brokerage model where you're selling house products, and your best fit is the registered investment advisor model, fiduciary model, where you're going out to try to find the best fit for your client. You're not having to sell a house product. Well, when I was going through my schooling, I was kind of, I'm green. I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm going to go talk to every health coach and wellness coach out there. I want to understand, how are they building their business? What are they doing? How are they, how are they, how are they collecting clients and working with people and all that kind of good stuff? And I kid you not, at least 99% of them were selling a house product, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But when it's kind of reminds me and harkens me back to the early world of our financial services industry, where the product is probably suitable and meets their needs, but is it the best fit? And that's really the big thing. I ran into somebody who called themselves a health coach, and you want to know what they were selling?
Uh,
Insurance. I'm like, wait a minute, how are you a health coach? Help me figure this one out. So what I was finding out was, I think one of the most important things for us to be able to do is take a step back, because this world of wellness, y'all, it is, and this is where the financial part comes in, is it's expected to be an $8 trillion business by the year 2027. Because of all these wonderful longevity products, there's so much stuff you are going to be able to choose from and pick from in order to make yourself well. But then that also means you're going to be doling out money left and right, listening to people's stories and listening to things to say, oh, okay, yeah, I want to try that. And I want to try that. And oh, that worked for her. I'm going to go. So I want to, and you'd mentioned the word agency, and that's a really big thing, is like help people step back and say, okay, wait a minute. What is, what am I really looking to solve here? What do I really want to do? What am I willing to do? And that's the biggest thing that so many people, we get caught up in these stories of success, but we're not willing to do the work that that person really had to do to get there. So my hope is to really help people kind of step back and take that work and really go through that work to help them understand, what am I really wanting to solve for? Because once you solve for one health issue, you're more likely to solve for another health issue. So it doesn't necessarily matter which one you start with. It just matters that you start.
Yeah, I love that because it does. I mean, that's really the big thing, right? You have to start somewhere and you really just need to start.
Yeah.
So, you have a new book out called Lessons from the Obstacle Course: 5 Strategies to Conquer the Muddy Fields of Life, and I can assure you I will pick up a copy and read that. But what I'd love for you to talk about is, why do you say that people should face life's obstacles like they do on a race day? Let's
I
talk
love
about
that part.
that. I
It's
know, I
probably
love that too.
because have you guys done a race? Like anyone, any kind of race, doesn't have to be an obstacle course, just a general
Yeah,
5K or
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yes, it's
So
been a
when you
long time.
been a long time, but when you're in that starting pen, you're excited. You're like, this is great. You had trained to get there. You've got this energy that is about you. Like, I am going to come out here and I'm going to show up and I am going to do the best I possibly can. And I'm going to go back to I'm going to get through that finish line and I'm going to get the bling, right? The bling is really important. We want the bling. So what I mean by I hope people to face when you're going on the obstacle course, there's one more thing besides the run, is that you've got these obstacles that you have to overcome. And in life, you have obstacles you have to overcome. And so many times, I think too many people come up to their obstacles and be like, oh crap, this sucks. Like, just this really negative attitude. And then that makes the obstacle like a gazillion times worse than it when it really is. I mean, brain surgery, not a great thing, but my husband and I giggled through the whole thing. Like we had this one point in time where he had blood clots in his legs, and I had to wheel him around in an office chair. And I told him, and that was when my back had gone out. And I looked at him. I'm like, this is what's going to happen when we're older. I am going to be wheeling your butt around in a wheelchair because one, I'm going to need the wheelchair to hold my butt up, and you're going to be in the wheelchair for something you did to yourself. But
Yep.
so it's really just taking this, that life is going to happen. Obstacles are going to happen. There are going to be things that are out of your control, and you can pout and mope about it, or you can say, okay, well, that kind of sucked. What can I do about it? And that's the attitude that people have on race day. It's like you get to some of these obstacles and you're like, holy crap, what did I just sign up for? Like, I got to overcome this. And you can just sit there and be like, oh, I'm not doing it, which I've seen people do on the course. And it makes me sad because it means that you've not stretched that muscle to try to get over the darn thing. And I have looked like, oh my gosh, I have looked silly. I've looked crazy. I mean, we've got some great pictures. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's how I looked coming out of this thing. But it's it's that thing of just let's just get in there and attack and do what we can do and say that, okay, I gave my best to whatever this obstacle is, and then realize, that's what I can do, and be okay with that. But just come at it with a better attitude instead of, oh boy, this really sucks. Because I mean, maybe it does, but in the long run, you still have to get through it. So choose which way you want to get through it.
Would you say that that is how for you the pivot is also a step forward? So when you're talking about the obstacles and the changes that well, when you're giving us your personal examples that you made, it feels like first and foremost on the inside, you mentioned mindset, you mentioned just, disposition. I love the invoking of laughter and levity in the face of something really difficult. It doesn't mean that you are not aware of the bigness of the situation, but bringing in that humor, so wonderful. So I'm wondering if you can share with us and connect the metaphor that you use of the obstacles and the race day and the mud of it all with what the pivot metaphor that Theresa and I use when we talk about, we think that the pivot is going to be a step back or a setback, or you're going to be thrown sideways and that's it. And then you stay in that direction. And what we find is that, on the contrary, over time, the pivot shows up to be a step forward, the movement forward, the transformative journey, ahead. Can you help us connect the two metaphors?
Sure. I think, and I think this is it, and it depends on where you're coming from. But for me, it's kind of the spiritual side of things. And I believe that I do firmly believe that life, doesn't happen to us, it happens for us. And that, yes, we may go through some really crappy things sometimes, and some things you're just looking at like, okay, I did not see that coming, and that really hurts. But I honestly do feel that I think if most of us looked back and looked at what's happened or transpired for our lives since that point, our lives are so much better because of that point. So it's just looking at it a little bit differently. Like, just again, it depends on, where you're at spiritually, but there's just so much stuff there's a lot you can't control, but you can control your response to it. And that's where I just choose to focus my energy, is looking at it. And I do try to look at the humor of things, because that's just my nature, is to find laughter in things. But I do think that things happen for you, not to you. And you just kind of have to be able to sometimes, I call it the ugly closet cry. Sometimes you just have to go into the closet and just cry your eyes out and scare the crap out of your clothes. And then you have to just sit there and wait for a little while in the dark and let your mind just think through it. And just, you have to embrace that emotion that you go through. You have to let it out, because if you hold it in, it's just going to, you actually will get unhealthy if you hold it in.
Yeah.
So it's just letting it out, and just and rolling with it, and understanding these things. A lot of times the negative things in life happen to us because they're supposed to.
Yeah. No, really, really great stuff today, Kelly. Thank you. Thank you to our guest, Kelly Majdan, for joining us today. We are out of time, but really some great tips, great things for people to consider, for our listeners to consider. And even I'd like to thank you for joining us today on Step into the Pivot.
Thank you
Yes,
for
thank you
having me.
so much. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Step into the Pivot. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights from our conversation. Remember, life is a series of pivots, and it's in those moments of change that we truly grow.
If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay connected, make sure to check out our websites. You'll find additional resources, behind-the-scenes content, and more details about our incredible guests. We love hearing from listeners, so reach out with your thoughts, questions, or your own pivot stories.
To keep the conversation going, be sure to follow us on social media. We're on LinkedIn and Instagram, where we share updates, quotes, and engage with our amazing community.
If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback makes a difference, and it helps us bring you meaningful conversations. We're signing off, reminding you that every pivot is a step forward. Take care, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Step into the Pivot.